Hi, I'm Felipe de Carvalho, and today I have the pleasure to speak with the former president of the UN General Assembly, María Fernanda Espinosa. Thank you so much for talking to us today.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Felipe. I'm so glad to be back with UN News.
Thank you so much for joining us. And my first question, Maria Fernanda, in your view as a former president of the United Nations General Assembly, what are the main challenges today that the UN has to prove that is more needed than ever after 80 years of existence?
Well, I think that the history of the UN itself proves that it's an organization that is irreplaceable, that humanity cannot do without, uh, and yet it has to be reinvented. It has to be reimagined. It has to be profoundly and structurally reformed. But we cannot forget history. No, the UN and the General Assembly, more particularly, is the laboratory for international policy making and international law. And if we recall 80 years ago, the first General Assembly in January 1946 in London, by the way, the first ever resolution of the General Assembly was related to the discovery of atomic energy, no, and um, basically it immediately responded with a resolution that adapted to this new particular threat, no, and basically atomic energy could have been used for peaceful purposes, but also could have terrible effects, as we then witnessed. No, so it was perhaps the act of preventive diplomacy, of cooperation, and of global governance, and that was almost 80 years ago. And since then, we have seen so many successes, so many things happen in terms of international law, human rights law, issues related to development, issues related to peace and security, that we always tend to see what is missing, what are the gaps, and of course we should 80 years later. But there's so much that has gone, thousands of resolutions establishing standards and policy guidance for countries on the main challenges of the past decades. As mentioned, international human rights law, sustainable development, peace and security issues. Even more recently, we look at the response of the system with the COVID-19 pandemic, with the Ebola pandemic, the issues of food security, of humanitarian response, and perhaps, and of course, the UN is not, it's a political system altogether. No, it's a combination, of course, of the political will of governments, of member states that are the core and the center of power of the organization, but the executive, the secretariat, the principal organs, the agencies and programs. It's a whole ecosystem. It's a political system that is very complex. Therefore, when we want to modernize the organization, when we want to make it fit for purpose, respond to the new and current challenges, issues like international organized crime, cybersecurity, new technologies, artificial intelligence, the climate crisis. No, the organization has to have this flexibility to adapt and transform. And I think that we are living in one of these moments of transformation.
For sure. And speaking about the General Assembly as a laboratory of policymaking, as you said, in 80 years, the General Assembly has approved thousands of resolutions. Many are actually groundbreaking, like the resolution on the right to clean air, for example. But how to ensure that what is decided there it's actually implemented by member states?
Well, that's one of the big deficits of the organization, and we have to be, very frank. No, of course, the decisions taken in the space of the General Assembly, then the ideal is that they become regulations at the national level, policy at the national level, that they're subject to investment and budgeting processes or planning processes. In other words, that the decisions taken at the multilateral level translate into the improvement of the life, the security, and the rights of people on the ground. And that is done with national ownership first. That's why it's so important that the shaping of international law and policy making multilaterally is really under the responsibility, the ownership of member states. Of course, well informed by science, by academia, with the active engagement of civil society. But at the end of the day, this is an intergovernmental machine, that needs to operate accordingly. If you have the ownership, the responsibility translated into national policy, regulation, and investment, and then that also has an impact at the local level. And here I'm also speaking as advocating for the very important role of local governments and regional governments that have to implement and deliver at the closest space of government with citizens. And this will only be possible if there is global awareness, if global citizens understand, know, and oversee the implementation of the decisions that are taken internationally. So that's why we talked about a more network and inclusive multilateralism. Even again, if this is it is an intergovernmental machinery, not the ownership of the whole state structures. Parliaments also have a critical role to play. As I said, civil society, science, academia, it has to be owned by society so the implementation is ensured. You said it well, Felipe. Thousands of resolutions came out of the General Assembly, and I think that we should be perhaps more nimble in the things that we adopt in the resolutions, in the decisions we take, but perhaps to push more for implementation and compliance.
Perfect. Maria Fernanda, the UN is turning 80 years, but only 5 women will have presided over the General Assembly during this time frame. You were the 4th and actually the first one from Latin America. President Annalena Baerbock will be the 5th and the first from Europe. What would you say to her if asked?
Well, first of all, it's good news that in 80 years we have yet another woman, and a woman for the first time for the countries called from the global north. No, in this case from Europe, because the other 4 we have come from countries of the so-called global south. No, from Africa, from the Arab states with Bahrain, from Latin America. I was very proudly the first one and the first ever president of the General Assembly from India, Vijaya Lakshmi Pandit. What I would say to the incoming president of the General Assembly is that I think that it's a critical moment for multilateralism and for the UN. And it is a moment of reinvention, of profound structural change. It is not a secret that the UN is undergoing a lot of financial, is facing a financial struggle, but it is not only about downsizing. It is doing more with less, basically, but prioritizing, but really looking at the proposed UN 80 from a priority, from a vision, from a grand vision, and from a priority setting exercise. I see the role of President Baerbock absolutely central in this in the process of implementation of the reform. Not only the UNAT process, but the Pact of the Future and the commitments that are enshrined in the Pact of the Future in terms of reform of the UN. So it's not only a cost-cutting exercise, a financial, austerity policy, but it is rethinking the system. And I think this is the process that has just started. An assessment of the mandates, which has to be in the hands of member states, an assessment of the processes and the management to see how the organization gains in efficiency, how it can deliver more and better, how it can decentralize better, how we can even in the presence of the organization at the national level can be choreographed and decentralized. So these are the exercises that I understand are taking place, and I think it's right time to the right time to do it, because the organization after 80 years requires a full reset, a full restart, and a full modernization, a revitalization of the way it does business. And for that to happen, political will has to come together. Member states, the secretariat, the main organs of the organization, but also the very complex ecosystem of programs and agencies that because they are the ones that implement the mandates, of course, according to the request and the priorities of member states. So it is an exercise that I am very optimistic is going to give the fruits and the outcomes that are needed in the times we live in today.
Okay. And also during the 80th session of the General Assembly, a new Secretary General is to be elected. And there is a strong reflection that it would be very important to have a woman elected. So far, the organization has been led only by men. And if a woman is elected by member states, what difference or contributions do you think a Madam Secretary General could bring to the United Nations and to the world?
Well, first of all, thank you for bringing up the Madam Secretary General campaign, which has started with GWL Voices. Secondly, the question would be, why not a Madam Secretary General after 80 years? And if we are thinking about a major reorganizing and restructuring of the organization, perhaps what we need also is a change in leadership styles. What we need is the opportunity to show and deploy different ways of doing things. A good manager, a good bridge builder. Many of the qualities that are needed, and that I think that a woman can bring. And sometimes we say it's a matter of historical justice, which it is after 80 years. But the question would be, why not? Why not this time?
Perfect. And to finish, Maria Fernanda, do you have any anecdote about your time in the presidency of the General Assembly, something unexpected that happened, or even something from the history of the General Assembly that people don't know, but it's already part of the oral tradition of the House?
Well, I would say that when you are the president of the General Assembly, basically your role is to serve the member states, to be an honest broker, to bring different positions together, to really work behind the scenes to ensure that consensus is built, to be able to respect and process dissent, because not always everybody is in agreement, and there is always space to express the positions of different countries. I think that in that sense the General Assembly is a unique space for that, for agreeing and convening and deciding, but also the spaces to bring your own perspective as a country. And I think this magic of having each country being represented, having a vote, having a say, it's the expression of the space that is inclusive, that is universal, that is the platform for dialogue. And sometimes this tension between national interest and global interest comes to play. But in the world of today, in a world that is so interdependent and so interconnected, it so happens that national interest, in many times, I would say not all the time, it brings together national interest with global interest or common interest. The work of the UN is about common good, the common good. When you talk about pandemics or climate change or peace and security or human mobility, all these issues are of global concern. And basically, I would say that the work of a president most of the time is behind the scenes. When we were working at weaving, for example, the pact on migration that was very controversial, we have to accept that. The work of the president is extremely important. When we were one of the most contentious processes is the negotiation of the Security Council reform. That's where again the president has to choreograph and build a consensus. And perhaps something that will remain in the House for a long time would be the efforts to eradicate single-use plastics, the use of single-use plastics at the UN. And I remember, the motto, no, a fantastic no single-use plastics at the UN, and that was an obsession I had when I arrived. And it's very happy to see every time that I visit the UN that no more single-use plastics, because we know that it's so harmful and it hurts so much nature in general, but ecosystems and human health. So, and now there is a process, of course, to negotiate a treaty on plastics. These are issues that I recall here and there, but it's hard work, good diplomacy, great ability to negotiate and to be a true honest broker. And I have full confidence in the incoming new president as well, and I'm sure that she will perform brilliantly.
Thank you so much, Maria Fernanda, for such an inspiring conversation and for sharing a lot of your views with us today.
Well, thank you, Felipe, and I was very, very happy, as always, to be with UN News.